Welcome to the Unstoppable Success podcast, where we spotlight visionary leaders who have mastered the art of growth, purpose, and powerful connections. I'm your host, Jacqueline Strominger, connector, high performance coach, and creator of the Leap to Your Success framework and 2 Steps to Yes. Each week, we dive into bold insights, real conversations, and powerful strategies to fuel your growth, deepen your relationships, and ignite transformational momentum. And why? Because you were meant to be unstoppable. Now, let's leap into the podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of Unstoppable Success. I'm your host, Jacqueline Strominger, and as you know, on this podcast, we hear from amazing leaders, influential people out there in the community who have incredible insights to share so that you can have unstoppable success in your life and in your business. So today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing all of you to Brandon Moon. And Brandon is a strategic operator with a proven track record of helping founder-led businesses scale with clarity, great word, structure, and sustainable momentum. And as the co-founder and COO of TD Pine Advisors, he specializes in bridging vision and execution, guiding clients through operational upgrades, team alignment, and enterprise value growth. With a background spanning family, business scalability, leadership development, and organizational change, Brandon brings a results first perspective to business growth. So, welcome, Brandon, because we all know that growth and having somebody like you in their back pocket as we expand in the business is so important. So, welcome to Unstoppable Success.
Thanks, Jacqueline. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
That's my pleasure. So, what you do at TD Pine Advisors. I'd like you to share a little bit about what you guys do, because uh, I think of it like sometimes like coaching. Like, do
Yeah.
we all need advisors? Do we all need coaches? And I think the answer actually is yes, but share.
Yeah. So let's talk about growth for a second, right? There's a difference between growth and scaling. And what's the difference? Scaling is the capacity at which you can have, and growth is, so think of a cup, right? So growth is the water level in the cup going up and down on any given year. But if you change the size of the cup, you're now talking about scaling. So now
Mhm.
you can have, a pond, an ocean, right? There's no limit to the size. It just depends on whether you're focusing on top line revenue, which is growth, versus scaling. Now, if you're going to focus on scaling, that means you need to put the right systems in place and the right people in place, and you need to have a culture and all of those things, right? That's where we come in. We help owners think of where they are now, where they want to go, and then close the gap in between.
So I love that that's where you help people. I'm curious, so, with that, you know, working with small businesses,
Mm.
you know, what do you think? What is the thing that you see people that gets in the way the most?
Yeah, I think that's a good
Going from,
question.
because, going from growth to scale.
Right.
And I think I love that description with the cup, right? Because um, I think a lot of people think of growth as scaling, but it's not, right?
Yeah, very two different things. And part of this is understanding my background. I have an engineering degree and MBA, and that's all great. I left corporate America to go run my family business. So in 2014, my grandfather had a 30-year-old sensor manufacturing business that he had started in 1980. So he was running that, but it was a lifestyle business. All the customers would call him, all the employees would go to him. He was the proverbial, owner operator and because it was a lifestyle business, right? You're not worried about whether the company's profitable or not. If you paid all your vendors and you paid all your payroll, and everybody's happy, right? Um, but that doesn't provide an option in the future, right? That is going to be very dependent on the owner. I left corporate America to go help him retire, and became his succession plan. By 2018, he felt comfortable to retire, And during that, I was there until 2023. We grew 4x. We bought two businesses. We disconnected it from him first, and then I became the 80-hour work week owner. Everything ran through me, and eventually, I finally figured out that it wasn't sustainable. So I hired a COO essentially to replace me. And I think that is the problem where owners feel like that nobody else can do what they do, and they create kind of a glass ceiling. And only when you really understand that everybody can be replaced, even you. And if you want to create an asset and not a job, you do need to think about how do I replace myself and find, and maybe it's not one person, maybe it's five people. It doesn't really matter, but you need to get all of the things that you are deciding on a day-to-day basis outside of your head and into somebody else's.
I think that is a really difficult act for a lot of people.
Hmm.
I mean, so no matter how small or how big
Yes.
you are. So
And I think, you mentioned it's a very difficult act. It's so difficult emotionally, right? We as humans want to feel wanted and needed and all of those things, right? But frankly, for a business to be an asset, it needs to be systematized. It needs to have systems that define what's happening, not whether there's a bottleneck in the owner who decides, okay, this is what we need to do today, right? The business needs to decide that, and you start disconnecting the person from the business. Sometimes that leaves a void in the owner, right? And so there's the do's and don'ts on what that owner's willing to do, and that's perfectly fine. It's their business, but it's also unreasonable to think that if you are ultimately needing this business to be your retirement, to build the business where it requires every decision to go through you, there's no end to that. Nobody's going to come in and buy your job because you've been there for 30 years and they respect what you've done. An investor doesn't necessarily have to be somebody with money that wants to buy your business. It might be your kids. It doesn't really matter who it is. If they're deciding that they're going to invest time and energy, they want to understand what the risks are, the risks of you walking away. How well can the business continue to move on? Because 100% of business owners are going to exit the business someday. It's a fact.
right. So there's a couple of things that you have said that I really want to really push and highlight because there are some really key nuggets. So number one is, you know, be replaceable,
Hmm.
right? So listeners, if you are in order to be unstoppable, let's say, with your growth in your business, or maybe you're even leading a team, maybe you're in a big company, yet
Hmm.
you're owning a team, you own the team, right? Be replaceable. But think of it not as like I to how can you empower the people that you work with
Hmm.
so that you are leading them versus sealing them, sort of like putting them like
Yep.
keeping them all contained, right? You want to bubble people up. So it's a really big thing. How can you be how can you be replaceable? And
Yes.
to think, you know, both whether you're in a company or you are the owner of a company, what are those things that you can do so that you are truly, building trust? And that is the one
Yes.
thing that you said that I wrote down trust because in order to grow, people need to trust you that you are going to be able to help them grow, and you need to trust others.
Yes, absolutely. It's amazing, especially if you're in top, right? If you're a top of your team, if you're a top of the organization, whatever, it's amazing the signals that you're sending whenever you trust below you and you empower them to be able to make mistakes, be able to make decisions. Because ultimately, if they feel empowered to take the organization to the next level, they're ultimately going to be able to take it further than you could have by yourself. And that's the thing is humans are innately designed to be to thrive in a society, right? We're innately designed to have multiple people, right? Even going back to the hunter and gathering,
Right.
they hunted
Well,
in
hunter
packs.
gather, right? You had to work together, right?
Right, exactly. And so, as leaders within the organization, right, there's a difference between a leader and a manager, right? A manager is saying, thou shalt do this because I tell you to do this. Whereas a leader is creating that vision and allowing basically removing the obstacles so that the team can get there. And it's so much more productive when you create that environment. And to your point, right? It doesn't matter whether you're leading a small business that has 10 employees or you're leading a multi-billion dollar firm that has hundreds of thousands. I mean, it really doesn't matter. You're creating a culture at the top, and the culture starts with you.
Mm. It so does start at the top. And that's actually where, I mean, one of the biggest things that I work with a lot of my clients on is, and I'll say, it's like be the CEO of you,
Right.
right? Start with how you want to lead yourself so that you can lead up, you can lead others, but
Hmm.
you have to know that, your vision for your company has to go and be spread about everybody needs to know the vision.
Yep.
Everybody needs to be able to embody that. But as you said, when everybody works together, it's amazing how much growth can happen because everybody's aligned,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And creating that alignment. Now, a lot of times people are afraid
Mhm.
to let go. So, how do you help people and when do you see that?
Yeah, that mind shift has to happen for the asset to get created, right? And I always go back to the example where that light bulb moment was in my journey. So, I ultimately, like I said, became that succession for my grandfather. He stepped away in 2018-ish, and I started running the business. And I mean, I tried to wear all the hats. I tried to do all the things. I was doing engineering, sales, operations. We created a quality control department. We were doing all, creating an outside sales department. But ultimately, the what it came down to was my CNC operator saw how stressed I was, and he gave me a resume of one of his old bosses, and said, "You need to talk to this guy." And during the interview, I realized you can replace me. Like you can do all of the things that I'm struggling with, and probably do them at a higher level because that's what your focus is. And that's what we did. We hired him to be the COO, and I became CEO. And now we grew 60% organically in 1 year, just because he could fight the fires and he could make sure that the employees are, being productive, that things that are supposed to ship are shipping, the customer service is being handled, and I am out looking for strategically what verticals do we need to get into, what are our competitors doing wrong, and what can we take advantage of, what's happening with supply chain, and how do we shore that up, and it became just this amazing journey of where the business was going because I had somebody who I could trust was taking care of what needed to be taken care of, and it gave me the confidence to go and grow the business. And it was absolutely amazing.
So again, key point here to be unstoppable, it's at some point there is you hit a precipice and where you actually need to know that you need to bring on other people. And
Hmm.
in a small business, that is, it could be, if you're a business coach or what your business, maybe it's hiring a VA, maybe it's bringing on a COO, maybe it's hiring the bookkeeper, but bringing people on. And
Yep.
as you said, you became the CEO. That's chief engagement officer, not an executive, right? You're the
Right.
person, right, that's
Yes.
engaging right out there. And you became,
Yes.
the way I look at it is you just said you started to go from working in the business to working
Absolutely.
in the business. And
Absolutely.
And to have that unstoppable success within a business, it's the CEO has to be able to work on the business. You need other people to work in it.
Absolutely. And this happens time and time again. And whether we see it or we don't see it, this is the life cycle of a business, right? A founder starts the business maybe in their garage, maybe, just at their house or whatever it is. But at some point, they're going to reach a plateau. They're going to reach the capacity of what they can do. Only when they realize that I can't wear all of these hats, I can't do all of these things. For me to get past that plateau, I need to bring on more people, or maybe it's not more people. Maybe it's just more third-party software. I mean, the apps available now are absolutely amazing. And,
Right.
you can increase your efficiency by bringing on all of these little tools, but it's still at some point you're going to reach that plateau. And you have to realize that, to get past each one of these stages, you have to make a transformational shift. And what's ironic is whenever you talk to these business owners that have been doing the same thing for 30 years, and they say, I just don't understand why I can't grow past this. Well, it's probably things that are being done within the business that needs to be changed. You can't continue to do the same thing and expect to get to different results.
We all
Um,
know that word. It's called insanity, right?
right,
You say it
right,
all the
exactly.
time, right? How, we people expect different results, but doing the same thing over and
Right.
over and over again.
Right. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter if it's a service business. It doesn't matter if it's a product or service that you're offering. It doesn't matter if it really doesn't matter what type of business, but there's always going to be a plateau at whatever owner's capabilities are. And basically that owner needs to decide this is what my strengths are and this is what my weaknesses are. And I need to bring in people or services or whatever it is to complement my strengths and close that gap in my weaknesses. And when the owner can make that mind shift and start to focus on the business from that perspective, the sky's the limit. You can get to that very next step, and then you probably have to make that same iteration again. But you continue to do that knowing that, hey, I'm at my capacity. Now I need to look at what I need to do differently.
Right. And what you just said, I think is really, I think it's really important that people really do understand it's a life. I always look at where, whether it's a roller coaster, I'm always saying MMA, right?
Yep.
Working with people, we're always talking about what do we measure, monitoring, and adjusting. And you
Yes.
always be looking at what those, where are you? Where do you want to go? And what needs
Yes.
to be adjusted, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And data is around us all day, every day. And yes, I'm going to start geeking out because I am an engineer, and so data is a big part of just the way
Right.
my thinking is. But it doesn't matter where we're talking about sales. It doesn't matter where we're talking about customer satisfaction. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about how productive our employees are. Every decision that we make is a data point. Every conversation that we have is a data point. Every action that we take is a data point, and that data should be used to make better decisions. And whenever you're tracking that, right, whether you're tracking whether you are not selling this service for whatever reason, right? And I've pitched this 10 times and not a single person has accepted it, right? Is it because it's the pitch problem? Is it because it's a wrong service problem, right? Am I in the wrong pool, right? But you have to understand where that data is so that you can then say, okay, maybe I am pitching this to the wrong people. So if I'm pitching it to the wrong people, now I need to find a different demographic to go after, right? And
Right.
and continue to reiterate. And as an entrepreneur, as a leader in an organization, you should always be looking at everything around us is telling us what we should do next, and be open to modifying what we've done if we need to.
So all right. So now I'm really curious. So you worked in the family business until 23,
Yes.
right? And so then you started, is that when you started TD Pine?
Yeah. So yeah, we'll go into a little bit. So in March of 2023, we closed an acquisition. It was one of my proudest moments within the family business. My grandfather got to see us basically buy a competitor that had been around since 1965, and so like he knew the competitor, he knew the landscape. That was one of the proudest moments. Uh,
Uh,
so we started assimilating that in. There was so much going on. They had orders on the books, and so we had to figure out how to get it on our machines and start production. And so it was a very stressful time. But we had a really good plan, and then in September of that year, my grandfather passed away. And so um, I can give you all of the horror stories of, what happens and how all that plays out. But eventually I got a letter from the lawyer saying that the resolution letter that gave me the authority to do all these things, buy businesses, raise debt, hire, fire, was null and void with his passing. And
oh,
so
shoot.
yeah, so it was a moment that that really, I mean, frankly rocked me, right? It became really clear really quickly that I was no longer a good fit to run the organization. So I walked away. And it took about, I mean, essentially that was my identity. I mean, that business was what I had poured my, focus on the last 10 years. And so at that point, it was a whole shift, right? Now I have no idea where the business or where I'm going, where my family is, my immediate family, what we needed to do. Um, so I took a few months off and then realized there's a pattern in America. The two businesses that I bought during the growth of our family business were fire sales because owners did not prepare and essentially they passed away and the kids were picking up the pieces. And it didn't have to be that way. For us, it was a strategic, purchase. But even the sellers were ecstatic because they had zero options. We paid pennies for these businesses that could have gotten more if they had just planned, right? And then I see what happened to my own family business, and I said, you know what? There's this pattern of owners that aren't prepared for that inevitable because again, it's going to happen. 100% of business owners are going to exit their business someday. And so, how can you structure that certainty and be proactive about that future when you have the energy to do that? That was kind of the goal and the mission for the business that we created.
You know, I absolutely love that mission. There are so many businesses. I mean, there are things that there's the unexpected that you don't think
Mhm.
about, right? So being able to have somebody in your pocket as you're creating something, or maybe it's like and I'll ask you this question, you know, where is that level that somebody needs to have? Is it 1 million? Is it 3 million? Where we
Mhm.
said, I need to bring in that advisor because when this keeps growing, I need to make sure all my ducks in a row so
Mhm.
that if it is a family business and somebody passes away, like what is that succession plan? Who's holding the cards? What's the percentage? I mean, and let
Yeah.
not anybody be blindsided.
Right. Yeah, and frankly, when an owner formed their business, they should be thinking about what I want to call it transition because everybody hates exit. So what that transition plan is, right? Whenever they form the business. So the problem is most don't, right? Most think it is emotionally disconnecting themselves from their business, thinking about what that looks like. But that's just the reality. Every one of us is going to have to come to that realization at some point. And that's the difficult conversation that essentially just needs to happen. And there's so many owners that want to bury their head and say, well, I'm too worried about, whether we're going to make payroll or not, this week. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. That's a hamster wheel. And if you want to be in that hamster wheel, then frankly, there's no end to that strategy. Only when you start seeing that, okay, I am currently in a hamster wheel. I no longer want to be in a hamster wheel. I have a problem with cash flow. So I need to bring in advisors who can help me with my problem with cash flow. I have a problem with sales. So I need to bring in people that can help me with sales. I have a problem with this. I need to bring in people who can help me with this. And so you know, as you're building your business, there's no time, there's too late to start asking for help. You know, I think that what happens is that pride becomes our limitation, right?
Mhm.
Pride becomes the fact that, you know, I feel like I have all of the answers, and so therefore I just need time. Well, problem is that time isn't always on our side. And we always call it sad clown syndrome. I don't know if you've heard the phrase, but you know, a sad clown, you know, they have the smile painted on their face because as an owner, you can't tell anybody that you're struggling with anything, and so you wear that confidence and you wear that happy face that everything is going really well, but underneath the surface, you're carrying all the stress, right? Am I going to make payroll? Am I going to have a problem with getting new clients? Am I going to have a problem with this? And you feel like you have to wear that stress by yourself. In reality, you don't. You just need to find the right advisors that can help you deal with the problems that you're having.
Right. And it's so important, you know, what you said is like sometimes it's, in the formation of the business, right?
Hmm.
Right? That you need to be thinking about your own personal end game. Like, what's your exit strategy? Like
Absolutely.
what do you think about our succession plan? But again, this will goes back to MMA. Maybe in the beginning you think you are going to only be a sole proprietor and that you're going to just be you, and then you do start to expand.
Yeah.
All those milestones and all those times are when you need to start to think about,
Hmm.
the plan for when you have other people that are on your payroll. When
Yep.
what if you do bring somebody else in? What if you bring in a family member? What do the rules say that you put in place in
Absolutely.
the corporate bylaws, right?
Yep.
So those are all things that always, again, goes back to that MMA, right? We always need to be measuring and monitoring and adjusting, and those are
Yeah.
things that can be adjusted. It doesn't
Absolutely.
we
That's
need
that's to know your why. Why are we doing this, right? And their why can change. But there has to be a North Star. There has to be a this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that could be, you know, I'm building this business to be able to exit in 15 years. Fantastic. What does an exit look like? I want to be able to just take dividend checks off of the business. I want to retain ownership, but I want it to have a cash flow that allows me to live the life that I want without having to be in the business. Fantastic. Okay, then let's build a business that checks all those boxes. But you have to know why you're doing what you're doing to be able to understand what milestones you need to hit along the way and how to structure the business to be able to do that. So, example, right? If I want to do a third party transaction and I want to sell to the highest bidder, right? All I care about is price. Some people think that way, and so great. That business needs to be structured completely different than I want to prepare this business for my kids. And I want the kids to be able to take over this business and they're going to be able to carry this on to the next generation. Those are two very different structures. And the decisions that I make along the way are going to be very different for each path, right? Let's say that I'm going to go the kid path. Fantastic, right? We're going to build a business, and your kids are currently 10, right? Okay, you got some time. They need to be brought up, but they need to also be brought up so that you're at their soccer games and you're enjoying life with them because there's so many kids that do not want their parents' business because that was the stepchild that got all the love. I've seen this play out, right?
right, right, right.
And it's so amazing that if you build the business knowing that you want your kids to be your successor and you're able to include them in the business, you're able to include them in decisions, you're able to be there for them as they grow up, that you're creating a pathway that is much more successful, and has a much higher probability of happening. Now, on the flip side, what happens if they choose not to take the business? if you have always in your head the thought of your kids taking over the business, but then at the very last minute they decide they're going to go to Google or they're going to go to Apple or they're going to go somewhere else,
Right, they're going to go find someplace else, right?
right? Well, but now you have zero succession plan. Now you're stuck, right? But if you built the business to have the foundation of the processes and the procedures and built it so that they would be willing to do it, you you also created a business that a buyer might take. It's very interesting how all of this can actually play out to an owner's favor if they're planning it and building with intention.
Yeah, and I love that. It is being intentional, and with where you're going and making sure that once you're building it, the people that need to know. And that's like the
Yes.
people in the business and your family. They need to know, right?
Yep.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Brandon, what's next for you?
That's a great question. We are still really early in this journey. We've been doing this for a little over a year and a half, and we have just evolved so much in that year and a half. It's been amazing to see this journey. My partner is the finance side of us, right? He's the finance side that I wish I had had while I was growing the family business. Um, he, he
Right.
he spent time in investment banking and private equity, and then was the CFO of a 2,500 employee business. And so he brings that just that financial controls and the structure that is so impactful, especially when you kind of combine that with the operations business development
Yeah.
that I bring to the table. So I do feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface. I think there's so many business owners that we're going to be able to help. I think that there's so many business owners that out there that need help and they want help, and just trying to reach them.
Right. That's fantastic. So Brandon, how can every listener connect with you?
Love LinkedIn. Brandon Moon is on LinkedIn, and just I love talking about business. I love hearing what people's successes are, what challenges they are, and I'll give my 2 cents for
Yeah.
what it's worth, and I love talking about business. And then also on our website, tdpineadvisors.com, we have a few assessments which are really powerful because like we talked about earlier, there's so many business owners that do not want to be thinking about an exit, and so they're kind of afraid to go talk to people about this. Which, let's go back to, you already have CPAs, you have attorneys. These people are well versed in what we're talking about. Just bring up to them, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what my concerns are. What should I do? Lean on the advisors that you have. But if you can go to our website, we have an assessment, the exit readiness assessment, which is really powerful because it's asking some of those tough questions that owners need to be thinking about.
I love that. Well, we will keep that in the show notes. So, listeners, do me the favor and please make sure that you actually reach out and connect with Brandon. This is so important, and there's great information that he has to share. And then I need you to do me another favor, and please, besides hitting subscribe, if you haven't already, make sure that you share this with business owners and leaders that you know that really need to hear this message. And I think most people do. I'm Jacqueline Strominger. Thank you all for listening. This is the Unstoppable Success Podcast. And thank you, Brandon, for being an amazing guest.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Unstoppable Success Podcast, where we don't just talk about growth, we leap toward it. If something today lit a fire within you, sparked a new idea, or gave you the extra push forward, please don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode and podcast with a friend, colleague, or fellow high achiever. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and most importantly, connect with me, Jacqueline Strominger, at leaptoyoursuccess.com for coaching, community, and your next bold move. Keep leading with intention, keep building your network with purpose, and most of all, keep leaping because you were meant to be unstoppable.